got them turned out, and fed hay because they ate grain while we were milking them. And so we'd always have to put hay out for them. And fed the hogs and watered them. And then in the evening, well, we had to feed and water the chickens. And if it was cold in the wintertime, we had to split enough wood and carry it up for my mom so she didn't have to worry about wood all day. And then we'd run in and clean up and eat breakfast, which was usually sausage or a piece of ham on a biscuit. And maybe if we had time, we'd have a biscuit with gravy on it. And then we all loaded up in the truck and left the house to go catch the bus at 6:45. And at night, it was pretty much the same ritual. We got off the bus. My mom always met us there, or my dad. And we'd get off the bus. And as soon as we got home, well, of course, we changed right out of our school clothes and our school boots, and would put our work clothes on and our work boots, because the same repetition was at night. You had to milk, feed the cows, feed the hogs, feed the chickens, and gather the eggs. And it took a 2.5 gallon milk bucket to hold the eggs. And then, of course, if we needed wood, Randy and I would split up wood and carry it up to the house. And my mom would take them eggs and candle them and wash them off real good. And of course, she'd keep a dozen or 2 dozen back for us. And then we sold the other eggs. She got 75 cents a dozen back then. And the money my mom made from selling the milk and selling the eggs was money for us kids when a school assembly came along. And, we all had to have a quarter to go to the school assembly, because there was 5 of us. And 4 of us lived to adulthood. But we always had to have a quarter or 50 cents or whatever they were charging. And my mom kept that money from they called it milk and egg money. And she kept that money for us so we could go to the school assembly and that kind of thing. And then when the weekend rolled around, my mom for years washed clothes on a wringer washer. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever saw a wringer washer, but the barrel is a washing machine with a dasher, and then above it is 2 rollers that squeeze down, that you put the clothes through and squeezes all the water out of it. Well, me and my brother's job was to carry the hot water out to the washing machine when Mom needed water, and then when she emptied the water, that was our job, was to spread it out over the lawn. And then, of course, she'd want rinse water, and we'd have to, fill that wringer washer back up with warm rinse water so she could rinse the clothes. And then she'd run them through that wringer washer and hang them on the clothesline. And I'm here to tell you, there's no crisper, better sheets than those that are hung on the clothesline. I mean, it was like slipping down into luxury. It really was. Because my mom's mom, my grandmother, my granny, we called her, she knitted and crocheted and sewed and quilted and all that stuff. And now my mom was a real good seamstress too. She sewed a lot. But now she never cared much for knitting and crocheting. And my grandmother Moorhead, in my entire life before we lost her, I never ever once remember her sitting down and doing nothing. Because now after lunch, my grandpa, of course he had that big old hole in his head, Well, he'd come in and lay down on the couch for a little bit after lunch. Why, my grandmother watched her stories, which were soap operas. And while she was watching them stories, she'd knit, crochet, cut material, something. She never just sat there and watched TV. She was always doing something. And her and my mom made most of our school shirts. Because back then, flour came in 25-pound cotton bags. And the flour manufacturers knew the ladies saved that material. And so the gentleman who run the general store there in Mountain Air, his name was Ed Birmingham. And it just never seemed to change. Whatever pattern my grandmother needed to finish a shirt or whatever else she was making was always on the bottom. We moved many a sack of flour to get her the pattern that she needed to finishing whatever she was making. And we never looked at ourselves as deprived or anything, because all the other farm and ranch kids that we rode the bus with did the same thing. And so my grandmother, and she'd make mine and Randy's shirts for school, and my mom usually sewed the stuff for the girls. And we used to just get so upset because we had to wear made clothes and not store-bought clothes. Well, what we didn't realize back then is everything that we wore was fitted. It was fitted to us. You know, clothes that you'd pay $150, $200 for today because they were cut to fit your body. But, you know, kids, we're always thinking we're deprived of something, I suppose. So we would wear those flour sack shirts. And they were pretty. I mean, they had all different kinds of patterns and checks and all that kind of stuff. And they were real attractive shirts. And my grandma, she'd put fancy yokes on them for us and that kind of thing. And so that was our school clothes. And I'm here to tell you, there's no better life in the world, because farming and ranching isn't a job, it's a way of life. And most people don't realize this, but a rancher only gets paid once a year when he sells his calves, and a farmer only gets paid once a year when he sells his crop. Now, we never sold much off the farm because me and my brother would haul it in to the house, and we had a big old hay barn and stack it up in there, because we only farmed for our own cattle feed. Once in a while, if we had a really good year and my dad had extra, he would sell some off. But the primary was to feed our cattle. And I started learning to drive a tractor when I was about 8, maybe 9, and I drove an old hand clutch DC case, and those were 4-cylinder gas tractors, and they don't have a clutch that you mash with your foot. You pulled a lever to engage their clutch and then put it in whatever gear. And my dad would just let me do things like float and things like that were real easy. But I learned to drive a tractor really well, driving that old hand clutch DC case. And of course, as time went on, we upgraded, and my dad was a real big John Deere fan, so most of the stuff we had was John Deere. It was never new. We couldn't afford new, but, you know, it was good quality used John Deere tractors and equipment. And when I guess I was about 14 maybe, when my dad unhooked the windmill and we put a submergible pump down our well so we could get a better volume and a better pressure of water. And let me tell you, that water was the best water you ever drank in your life. It really was. It really was. And then on Sundays, of course, we'd all get bathed and washed behind our ears and all that good stuff. And we had our Sunday clothes, and we'd get dressed in our Sunday clothes, and we'd drive into Mountain Air and go to church. And when church was over, my grandma usually went with us, but my grandpa didn't because, well, of his head. And then we'd go back out to my grandmother's house on Sundays, and she'd butcher a couple of fryers and fried chicken and mashed potatoes and biscuits and gravy, and my uncles, my mom's brothers, usually came over, and we'd all sit around and eat, and then we'd disappear, and my dad and my uncles and all with my grandpa and them, they would all visit for an hour or so. Then pretty soon, my uncle, my mom's oldest brother, would come out and say, who wants to go with Uncle to hunt for arrowheads and pottery? Well, if he said he was hunting for rocks on the moon, we'd have went with him because we just idolized him. And we'd go up there on a piece of ground that my dad owned, and he took a cane that he'd sharpened the end on, and he'd pick them up, pick out, and we'd find arrowheads that were, who knows, 100, maybe 150 years old, and pieces of pottery. And one time my mom and dad found the butt plate of a carbine rifle and a couple of U.S. Cavalry buttons up there, from days gone by. And so I'm just telling you, yes, we worked hard, and we never got a day off because milk cows and pigs and chickens, they don't know it's Easter Sunday or Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day or 4th of July. They don't know that, and they have to be tended to. Then you went and took the day off, the rest of the day off, but you had to be back home in time to tend to the chores. And we would go arrowhead hunting, like I said, with my uncle on Sunday afternoons, and he drove the maintainer for the county. He'd come by and pick us up. We'd jump up there on that Caterpillar maintainer. He always kept a couple pillows there behind the seat, and we'd ride about 30 minutes and be sound asleep. But we thought riding the maintainer with my uncle was just, boy, that was just the thing to do. And anyway, we lived a charmed life and didn't even know it. Life was simple. My dad, my grandpa, well, and my uncles too, they didn't have much gray area, if any. It was black and white. It was either right or it was wrong. And they understood if you did something wrong because you're human, so you're going to do something wrong. But when you were a kid and you did something wrong, there was a consequence. Now, my dad never was much of one. I can think of maybe 3 times that he actually busted my tail. My dad was much more creative. Well, if you boys got time to get into this or that or whatever it was, obviously you got too much time on your hands, so you need to clean out the chicken houses or that corn crib, it needs a bunch of those slats nailed back on, stuff like that. And let me tell you, it